I miss these places. Like, I miss those moments, when I look back at my career. And it sucks because they're not around anymore. So let's give them a little tribute.
I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, a podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Eric Himan is an award-winning singer-songwriter and has played shows with the likes of Ani DiFrance, Melissa Ferrick, and Leon Russell. To celebrate his new single, Local Gay Bookstore, we caught up to discuss his favorite lost bookstore, Lambda Rising. I need to kind of warn you, though, that we go all around the houses with a bit of a peer support session in the middle, all about the trials and tribulations of being a musician.
My performing history had started in 2002, really, when I put out my album I Go On, and I was actually able to start touring because I graduated from college at Penn State in 2001. I put out an album in 2000, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was like a self-titled thing. It was just me acoustic, and I Go On felt like more of a band, more of a better writing in that way. And then from there, I just kept putting out an album 1 or 2 years, back to back to back, and I would just start touring. And I was up in Pennsylvania, and then I would just grow further out and further out and further out, and just made touring like my number one goal. So in the end, it was great because I was able to make a living, meet a lot of people, be very hands-on, and continue to put out albums. And then I'd swing back to that town again when I had a new album. And it felt like I was on a circuit.
Mm-hmm. And so what was it? So like in 2002, what was it like being, I'm being a bit presumptuous here, but let me finish the question. What was it like being an out musician at that time?
At that time, I was just getting my feet wet into it. 2003, or I think it was 3. That was the first time I was in like Out magazine or Advocate magazine, and that I felt was a nice introduction to being an out artist. Whereas before, you're just an artist who's gay, and like, but and this is before like the internet is really kind of what it is now. So I mean, everything was more like, oh, he's gay, word of mouth. Like, unless you were in those big national publications, you really weren't getting. It's not like I could just jump on Facebook and be like, I'm gay, because that wasn't around.
So you had to carry a sign around then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you kind of had to, find your people and play. So that was like playing a lot of prides. So it was, in some ways, it was easy in that way because I was younger and like, playing these songs, and I was new, and there weren't a lot of people doing what I was doing. In some ways it was great because I felt new. I felt like I was a male version of what people saw a lot of female versions of, because I'm very influenced by females more as musicians than I am men, which is a very gay stereotype. But
yep, that sounds familiar.
But Ani DiFrance and Melissa Etheridge and Tracy Chapman, and it just went down that road. So I was always thinking, I remember one time some gay man said to me, "Oh, I don't think people will listen to you. Like, gay men just like dance music." And I was like, well, the gay men that I know like have dance music, but they're all listening to like Tori Amos and Tracy Chapman. Like, they also have that part of their music collection. Yeah. So I'm going to appeal to that. But then I would go play prides, and some of them would be great because of the novelty of what I was, and there weren't many people doing it. Like, I remember getting compared a lot to Rufus Wainwright in the very beginning, but only because we both were out gay people. Mm-hmm. It wasn't we don't sound anything alike. I was playing guitar, he plays piano. I mean, we were very different. But people would lump us together every once in a while in articles and stuff. So it was getting on a stage at Pride in a negative way when they would be like, well, you're not a drag queen and you're not a lesbian singer-songwriter. So they were like, where do we put you? And it was really like, I mean, and Pride still are kind of like that now. Even with RuPaul's Drag Race being as big as it is, it's like, we're back to that. Where it's like, oh, you're not a woman, you know?
Yeah. This is exactly my experience. It was always like, oh, the acoustic stage is women only, so we don't have anywhere for you to go. I was like, what? Yeah.
And you would think that would be different because there's so many of us. Like I don't know if there's so many, but I can name a ton of them. But I struggled with that, and I felt like I had to kind of push and be like, well, I'm that guy, and I'm gonna get like, you know, attention for being that kind of guy. Like I'm gay, but I'm a singer-songwriter, and I'm an artist who happens to be gay. My music isn't gay, but I'm gay. And then gay media would just be like, I remember one time I was doing a photo shoot for a magazine. I can't remember. It was like one that's probably not around anymore. It was like one of those magazines. There's like a ton of them at a time that was like DNA and genre and like one of them. And they set up a photo shoot. And I was like, oh, great. And I have my guitar. And then the guy's like, you know, picture. Okay, lose a guitar. And then I'm just standing there. I'm such a reluctant artist. I'm not a showy offy artist. If I didn't have to do music videos to get attention or be visible, I probably wouldn't be. But it's just this constant, you have to. Oh, well, if you want attention, if you want people to show up to your shows, you got to do this. So we're taking the picture, and eventually he goes, okay, now take off your shirt. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Because I knew the minute you do that, it's not about the music anymore. It's about this. And I resisted that. And then I would watch other people do all that crap and get a lot of attention for it. And it was always a struggle because it's like, well, it looks like, you know, they're getting all the audience, you know, from that. And that was always very hard to not buy into that. Yeah. And always try to stick with the lesbians. But the lesbians would always, every once in a while, they'd be like, you're not a lesbian. Get out. You know, and that was hard because like,
oh no, lesbians never say things like that.
Well, I would open for like Melissa Ferrick, and I would open for like all of these women, you know, and their audience would be like, dude, get off the stage. You know, like, you know, not so openly, but like it was, I knew I was playing to an audience that wanted something a little bit different, but it was very hard to build that audience of men in that same kind of way and it not be about
sex,
the physicality and sex. Yeah. And I just wasn't that. I've always written my songs just like any artist that's trying to tell a story.
And so did you make, like, so I know that it's not really that common now, but I know that in the mid-noughties, for me, there were lots of friends I had who made the conscious decision not to be an out musician because they didn't want to be defined by that. Did you have any kind of tussle with that?
No, because I was so excited and like I was so happy with when artists were out and what I got from that, like that there was no other way to do it. And I felt like, you know, playing any kind of game as to hiding it or anything like that was just so much effort in a dishonest way. And it was hard to be this earnest, you know, I'm telling my truth and hoping to have a dialogue with people via song and then not include that. Like it felt very like I'm tricking you. I mean, it's hilarious. Right now I'm on TikTok, which is garbage. And
that's your expert opinion.
That's my expert opinion. A friend of mine was like, oh, there's a lot of music people on there. You should really get on there. And I resisted and resisted. And then the pandemic happened. I'm like, all right, well, I got nothing to do. I'm going to see how this works. And then I got on there and it was like, of course, I'm not posting any videos of me half naked, and I'm not doing anything necessarily overtly gay. I guess you could say I'm not on there reading people or, doing anything overtly gay. So my audience, because I'm just putting music out, is like 75% women. Mm-hmm. And then even today I thought, oh, maybe I should do a post about being gay. Because I don't even think that, I don't know if that's really coming through. So I just thought that was kind of funny that, when I would play shows and that be such a moniker, like, here comes gay singer-songwriter Eric Himan. I mean, I struggled with, why do we need to put the word gay in front of it? But I was never about, deleting that part of who I was in my songs, and obviously who I'm speaking about and what my story is.
Yeah.
But I would get advice from industry people saying you shouldn't have done that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like who?
I'd be, playing an event, and someone would be like, oh, this is a showcase for a record label, but I'm sure they're not looking for anybody gay. Somebody would say oh, you should play Pride, not this festival. There was this is what gay men do, so you should be doing this. I would get a lot of unsolicited advice as to, there's a reason all these older people came out after, their careers were so big. There's not a lot of people who went in like that.
Yeah, I mean, my experience was I had the same kind of advice that people were giving, maybe just don't say what the person's gender is in the song. Maybe just say they. Just don't make it a big deal. Don't make it a focus. And then I'd be like, but the whole, as soon as I start talking in between songs, people are going to know. So what the fuck is the point in pretending?
Yeah. And they would be, and as much as they're not expecting you to be gay, they're also not expecting you to not be talking about your life.
Yeah.
And the omission of a woman would be pretty apparent after a while when you write songs about trying to find love in a world where you're not getting it, or dealing with coming out and people not liking it, or your family kicking you out, or, so I just inundated myself in gay media and the gay world, because I felt like I had a voice in it.
Yeah.
And then I watched it completely take a 180, which has been interesting, where I don't feel like, gay media started to kind of shut off. The more progressive we got, it's like somebody turned down gay media's volume. You know what I mean?
Elaborate.
I feel, and this kind of goes in with the bookstore thing too, is because I feel like as we got more progressive, people didn't feel they needed to go to gay bars to be seen and to be out. And we have all these apps that people can be gay no matter where you are to find somebody. You don't have to actually be in a club. So then gay clubs start hurting, and straight people start going to them, like bachelorette parties and stuff. And then gay men are getting mad, what are all these women doing in my gay club? And then I watched gay print media disappear, one by one. We don't need this many magazines, or oh, we don't need a weekly gay rag, in this town. And they start finding it harder and harder to support themselves with advertising. Oh, people don't really need to know that you're gay. We're over that. Why do you have to define yourself by your sexuality? Why is your sexuality a personality? Which was hilarious to go from gay singer-songwriter to now that gay part's gone. And I didn't take it away. It went away.
Oh, okay.
And then you put into the bookstore, element, and they start all going out of business because people don't feel like they have to go into a space and be inundated with LGBT artists and books, and they can access all this stuff in their own privacy, in their own time. and and that element of culture starts to disappear.
Mm-hmm. But
like,
so,
aren't we past this point where we really need these places?
yeah, but so it's not that media has become so streamlined in what it's representing that it no longer has space for other voices. That's not what you're trying to say.
No, but there is an element of what I feel like LGBT media is now, because all of those smaller elements are kind of disappearing. All now you have are all the big ones,
Mm-hmm.
and all the big ones are focused on big. So like if they have an opportunity to feature a young unknown person or Kim Kardashian's gay best friend, you know what I mean?
Or a straight person who's signed to a major label but is trying to appeal to that market.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And I feel that now more than ever.
Mm. Yeah. So let's talk then about touring. So at the top of the conversation, you were talking about how you were building your career by touring and going to different venues, and some of those venues happened to be queer bookshops. One of which we're going to talk about today, which is Lambda Rising. Before we get onto that, though, I think it might be worth talking about the kind of coffee shop scene in America, because I don't think it's very common in other parts of the world. There's probably not that much to explain other than there are lots of venues where people perform in coffee shops rather than pubs. I think it's an American thing. Like here, it's maybe more common now, but most gigs for singer-songwriters would be in pubs rather than in coffee shops, and most would be in the evening rather than during the day.
I'm not a coffee shop singer. I am a pub, like bar singer.
Mm-hmm.
I loved having a big voice. I like playing a lot of covers, amongst writing my own stuff because I just love music. And there's something fun about like how people try on clothes. Like I like trying on songs, like to play a Hall & Oates song is like, oh, I wonder what I'd sound like doing a Hall & Oates song. Like, oh, I wonder what I'd sound like doing a Katy Perry song. Like it was always fun to do these things. And then to have this immediate, instant opportunity to do that night and to get an immediate reaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I love live performing more than I like recording anytime, is because it's so instantaneous. It's like you're on, do this, try this, and it's just a very quick back and forth. Whereas like, social media and being online and recording is like a very delayed process. But coffee shops were never, it was a necessary evil. It's like, oh, are you an acoustic artist? You singing and playing acoustic guitar? Well, you belong here.
Oh, that's so funny.
No, I belong there.
That's like the total opposite of what my preference is. I'm like, everybody sit down, everybody be quiet. I'm going to tell you a story. But you prefer that kind of cutting through the noise.
Oh, yes. It feels like it's the chase.
Yeah.
It's the game of like, how good am I? Well, let's see. Let's see if I can cut through all this BS noise and get people to pay attention to me. And that was always the fun of playing in bars. And I was playing gay bars, and I was playing dance club bars where they like, take the record off and they're like, go.
Oh,
like,
God.
Oh my God. And it was such a fun challenge for people to have to listen to me, or they turn off a TV behind you and it's like, go. Like that was, for me, a challenge I anticipated, sitting in a coffee shop while people are not there for you initially, and having them kind of just sit and listen and trying to keep everybody quiet, or worse, it's like too quiet. And then you're like, are you guys bored? Am I boring you with this?
But so hang on, we're about to talk about a coffee shop type situation, aren't we?
Yeah, a lot of the bookstores were that coffee shop kind of atmosphere, but it was a little better than that opportunity of just playing your average coffee shop, because those bookstores, you're right, they did have a coffee shop vibe, but they weren't coffee shops, and the fact that people were in there because they were desperate for I think, to be surrounded by culture, to be surrounded by something that they didn't get to live in their, every day of their life, which they probably wanted to. There's an acceptance in being in that space. Mm-hmm. It was a comfortable, warm space. And here you are as an artist coming in there, which a lot of artists didn't do, coming in there and bringing your thoughts and opinions, and they can be open about their thoughts and opinions. Maybe they couldn't be that way at work. Maybe they couldn't be even that way at their own home. But this was a space where you could be as open and loud and I loved that. I loved the buzzing of that. A coffee shop was like a stark version of that. It was like I would used to there were open mic nights in Philadelphia that I used to play at this place called The Point that got its fame from having artists like Bruce Springsteen and Bonnie Raitt and all these people played there when they were just starting out. And they would have this open mic night, and I would go and I'd try to get on so that I could play a show there. And I remember it was the idea of like, ooh, everybody be quiet. But then them themselves at the people that were putting it on were like, shh, like they're the ones making all the noise, and you're playing a very quiet, like, you're playing a very quiet song where just like, and then they're the ones going, shh, okay, how much is that going to be? So
because that's the other thing when you play in a coffee shop and you're in the middle of a song and then the coffee machine starts going.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's all you're hearing is like the sound is the steaming of the milk, and then you're hearing them tap out the thing on the espresso, and they're making all this noise, and then it's this idea that, oh, you should be grateful you have an opportunity to perform your music in this place, and then I would always be too loud for those places. Okay. Like, whereas when you played in a gay bookstore, you were the special event. Uh-huh. When you're playing a coffee shop, you're just atmosphere.
Okay. So thankfully, that's not what's happening. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Lambda Rising, where you got to have a raucous good time.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember the first time you went there?
I remember it was probably 2003 or 4. I would play in DC because I was in Pennsylvania, and Lambda was in DC right off DuPont Circle, if I remember, and it was a very overtly like gay neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Like DuPont Circle was the gay, area of DC. Like the Castro was the gay area of San Francisco. And it was just a really awesome vibe, like walking around. It's like Santa Monica and LA or, West Hollywood. There were areas that just like somehow made you feel like you weren't, like you fit, and this was made for you in a way that, like, that's how Lambda Rising felt. And I was playing there's like a few other there was another Lambda Rising in Virginia, I think. It was like a chain. But I just remember going in there and seeing like DVDs of movies I didn't know existed that were based on gay male relationships, and musicians and music that was done by artists like Katie Lang. And, I don't know. I think it was like, oh, this isn't just a porn store. Because I felt like a lot of times Gay Bookstore, and believe me, since I came out with this song, it's hilarious how many people equate Gay Bookstore to porn. I'm like, no, I wasn't writing about a porn gay bookstore. I was writing about a gay bookstore. But yeah, I mean, that was in there, of course, and that was a part of some of it, and it was provocative. But it wasn't all of it, and it was sometimes it was a very small, if not there at all. Because I remember there were a lot of lesbian-owned gay bookstores. Like there was one in Indianapolis where it like, didn't have any of that element of porn or anything like that. And there's even a Portlandia, which I don't know if you're familiar with that series. I think there's two characters in there that were like two women running a lesbian bookstore. And it was, some of it was just really like that. It was like women running a place that they felt like was about women's opinions and women, like it was very women centric because there were there aren't those places, that aren't, made. The places that were made for women were like gyms. It wasn't, do you know what I mean? It wasn't the women-centric places, especially lesbian women-centric, were the bookstores.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the people that carried my music through a lot of those bookstores, the distributor was Goldenrod. And Goldenrod was LGBT specific one where people would send their albums and then they would plant them in all the gay bookstores. So, and that was run by women, and predominantly women were the ones featured in that. I remember what my rep for that was like, "Oh, this isn't dance music?" Like, nope. Stick it with Ani. Stick it with Melissa. Like, stick it with all those women playing guitar. So, a lot of my beginning and being in Lambda with my actual CDs was because of Goldenrod.
And so was the first time there a gig?
No, first time there was just going in there. I think I was gigging at a club called it was like Iota, and that was one of my first gigs in DC. And I remember going from there, going to Lambda Rising, and ended up buying, I don't know if you can see it. Is it this one? This picture right here.
The performer.
Yeah, like this one right here, and it says, "Without music, life would not be fair."
Oh.
Like written on a brick wall. And I remember buying that at Lambda Rising the very first time I was there, because I thought, oh wow, there's art in here, which was something that I left out, in saying what these bookstores had, but a lot of them had art, and it wasn't just pornographic art. It was legitimate art by gay artists, and it was some of them, all of them were independently owned, but Lambda Rising was one where I felt like it was so classy, and it was art by gay people, music by gay people, all of these things came from somebody who's just like you. And when you're looking for that kind of representation in your life, when you're not surrounded by it growing up, and I mean, I didn't know anybody that was gay growing up, and people just weren't gay in your house when you were growing up, or in your neighborhood, or anybody said anything. Gay was something that you did when you left,
Yeah.
So to see all of this come from someone that shared this thing about you was so exciting to me.
Yeah. It's almost overwhelming though, isn't it? So much content that you didn't know existed. You're just faced with it all at one go.
Yeah. And think about that. That was 2003, 2004. So, I mean, 2020 is there's so much of it. It's not even it's not something you could fit in 100 stores. But at that time, I felt like it was still a very burgeoning thing, to be carried in a store like that, and that there weren't that many authors that would travel around and talk about gay books that they had written, the gay-themed books they had written, and there wasn't a lot of artists that were running around saying I'm an out artist, and traveling around. The internet was not nearly what it is now, and the ability to not be able to just have to go somewhere to see someone. I mean, I kind of long for that a little bit still. Is that older way of you had to experience stuff fully and sometimes only in one way.
Well, you mean you had to make an effort?
Yeah, I mean, the common day piece to that is you make an album, right? You just put all these songs on something, you make an album, and you're putting it out. You don't have to even physically put it out. It exists without it being a physical CD or an album. Mm-hmm. And then you think to yourself, should I put it on Spotify, or should I just make it available on my website? Well, sorry, my friend, but people would say to me, no one's going to hunt you down as a beginner person just finding you on your website. Now you're going to have to be on all these platforms, or else people will not find you. And there was a time where people had to seek you out to find you. And I guess I missed that. Like, no one takes the effort. I think it's much harder to get people to take that effort of like, oh, well, I'm going to have to go to his website to get his album because I can't get it anywhere else. And it's such a risk, you know?
Yeah, well, that was the thing, isn't it? Like, that commitment you would make from buying a CD of like, well, I don't know what any of these songs sound like. I've heard one thing on the radio and I kind of liked it. Don't remember the tune, but I know I kind of liked it. And I'm going to spend £10 on this, which you don't have to do anymore.
No, you don't have to make any commitment. In fact, if you're not on Apple Music or Spotify, which are to me also, because you're a performer, but you're also a listener. Mm-hmm. So it's like how you consume music, it can be completely different as to how you produce it and put it out. Like I'm making CDs, or I've made CDs. I'm kind of done with it now. But the last CD I made was I think last year. I put out my Contenders album, and I did it through one of the crowdfunding things. And so I had to have a physicality to it to put it out. And it's like I don't have a CD player. I can't even play CD, because I just don't have one. So to me, that's the ironic part about how you consume music is so different sometimes than how you want to see it produced or put it out. And the way that you have to put it on all these platforms is like people will not seek you out, and you can only ask people to do so much because buying a song is not even a thing. Yeah. People don't even have to buy a song anymore. Yeah. I don't somebody pops up in the world. I go to iTunes and I'm like, oh, who is this person? Or Apple Music. I don't have to pay for it. I just consume it and I walk away. Mm. The value of that music, I think all of this stuff has made music so unvaluable, and so even live music to be kind of unvaluable unless you're in like this world. You know what I mean? Unless you're big. Mm-hmm. There used to be that 2002 to 2008, I felt like people were like, oh, I don't even care if you're big. Like, this is where I want to see people. I want to discover people. I want to find people. Like, I want you to be my artist, and you help define my taste in music. And that was exciting because people were looking for newness. And now it's like, people are getting that so much and so saturated, and it's so free. They don't pay for crap. That I think they're like, this is boring. I'm only listening to this because this is valuable. So I struggle a lot with that.
It's a tough one because at the same time, you are able to reach more people through Spotify and through Apple Music, like people that you would never have been able to reach. Like, I totally get what you're saying in that.
But those interactions to me are not as valuable as I feel like somebody who would take the time to do a little bit more. I watched some guy complain on TikTok because, again, I'm trying to figure out how this works for musicians. It's one guy's like, he was kind of mad. It's a young guy. He had like an okay voice. He's like a cute guy. So a lot of, I think, and he was just duetting stuff. He's like, sing with me. You know what I mean? And it wasn't anything striking or anything. It was just, he was consistently like nice looking. And he was also on Spotify, and I guess he had stuff on other platforms, but he was mad. And he's like, okay, you guys, like, I have 100, like, because they put the picture of themselves behind them of their pages. He's like, I have 100,000 followers on this app, on TikTok, but I only have 200 views on Spotify, and I only have this many Instagram, which was like 4,000 Instagram followers. And he's like, I don't understand, 100,000 and then nothing. So that to me is like how people consume music. Like, he couldn't get people into his own music using these platforms because people are just shuffling.
Yeah. But I mean, that kind of takes us back to that conversation about showing your chest.
Yeah.
You might get people's attention and you might get them to, follow you or whatever, but it doesn't mean that they're going to engage with your music or give a shit about you.
I think at that time, like of Lambda Rising, and when I was playing a lot of gay bookstores, there was also MySpace. And the joy about it's honestly the joy about MySpace was that there was a platform that was really built well for musicians. That wasn't about music videos, and you had to listen to people. Like, I remember on it, you had 4 tracks as a music page. You had 4 tracks, and that was it. There was nothing else anybody really got from you other than a picture and 4 tracks. And people had to sit there and listen to it and go like, oh, actually, this is good. Whereas now it's all everything. I mean, Instagram is terrible for musicians, because it's all mainly picture based. Here I am playing a big show. What does it sound like? Who the hell knows? It's all, and everybody is their own bias. So everybody is like positioning themselves to look like they're all doing a lot better than they actually are. But you're the one who's holding the camera. And if you're like pointing it behind a crowd picture, and it looks like you're standing in front of a crowd, people will go, oh, you're standing in front of a crowd. And you're really not. Whereas like MySpace was like, this is what you sound like, and it is what it is.
And here's how you've chosen to customize the background of your page.
And here's how just the custom, and the small parameters of that was almost easier than the vastness of TikTok and things like that now, because it's just it's coming at you all so fast. And I think MySpace was really built well. Facebook is not really built well for that.
No. I think the bigger issue is this, like, the contradiction of people's need or purported desire for authenticity without then also recognizing that that's actually really boring. And also like the cancel culture existing. So there's this like, you need to be authentic, but you need to also do it within the parameters that we're setting for you. So
exactly.
You can't be a flawed human being. You have to be open and honest, but not. Yeah.
Yeah. And TikTok, and I mean, more specifically to that, it's so funny to see, like, playing those gay bookstores, you had like, this person was like in your face, and you're like, I'm Eric, and this person's like, I'm Greg, and you're like, Greg, I'll see you next time I come back, get on my mailing list. Like, there was this interaction. And now it's so funny to me when I see somebody on TikTok talk about their hundreds of thousands of followers and this recent element of it getting banned in America, because of the president. So, of course, the day that came out, you're on TikTok and every other video is somebody being like, oh my God, you guys, I just want to say, like, I love all like 100,000 of you. And like, you really mean so much to me. And this platform is going away. And this has really made, a big difference in my life. And TikTok followers versus like MySpace or Facebook is even more faceless. Like, it's even more, there's so many people that are like, this is their picture. And you're like, what are you? And they have no videos or whatever. But I mean, it's just so inauthentic, that it's like you're saying, it's so funny everybody has to be perceived as like, this is the real me, take me or leave me. And then those interactions that they're looking for are just as empty, as the expectations that they place on them. I don't know. I could talk about that forever.
Yeah, it's odd.
It's like the world is going, like, it's like people doing double dutch, like the jump rope double dutch, and you're like, that's how I feel now about every time I go back to music and try to put it out or try to do something. I mean, even with the Gay Bookstore song, it's like, I feel like I'm doing this weird game of double dutch where I'm like, do I jump in now? Okay, I'll wait. Or do I jump in now? And it's just getting faster and faster the older I get.
And so what are you jumping into?
Media.
Okay.
Like jumping into putting yourself out there, in a way that is authentic. And that you're trying to put your music into this very fast, saturated this ain't going to stop for you. So you better figure out when to jump. And if you jump in correctly and fall, it's going to keep going as if you never jumped in at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know like it's a weird thing to say as a singer-songwriter who is obsessed with talking about themselves, but it's hard to talk about yourself on social media without sounding like a prat.
Oh, completely. But then it's funny to watch all of these people on TikTok and all these apps, especially TikTok. It just boggles me because it's like none of you have an agenda. None of you have a business. Like none of you have, there's no art you're pimping out. You're not a painter. There are people who do that kind of stuff, but the majority that I see is like, they're just your average person living their life trying to get famous. And that is youth culture right now. I had a 16-year-old, who's now 21. And that 16-year-old was trying to do it before TikTok on YouTube. Like YouTube was I'm going to be famous. Oh my God, my followers. Like I need to speak to my fans. And it's like, you are not doing anything artistically outputting. You know what I mean? You're not putting out anything. It's just you blabbling on about your opinions. And if you can spin that into a business, where you're making shirts that say your stupid things on it, like awesome. But for me, I just laugh because those used to be the musicians, those used to be the artists, those used to be people who made and produced and did stuff. And now it's just people regurgitating other people's content as if it was their own, pretending to say something that someone else said from a movie in a funny little way. They're not trying to be comedians in real life. Everybody's just using it as this fun little thing that now they're getting obsessed with how many numbers you have and how many people are your fans. I hate that word.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say, like, I know we're just totally slagging the whole thing off, but it is an art form in itself. Like that, I was going to say vapidness, but that makes it seem like I'm not being sincere. That there is an art form into creating like meaningless content.
There's an art form to being successful at getting people to look at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes I feel most people on things like that have to reduce themselves to the lowest common denominator, which is very taking off your clothes in some kind of way in order to get that.
Yeah.
And if you, and going back to the Gay Bookstore thing and the gay media, I felt like that was what was to be expected of me. And at that time, playing those bookstores, especially when they were less about that and more about community, that was what made them so special to me and why I wrote a song about how much I miss them. Mm-hmm. It's because I was on TikTok, because I was on all these things. And I'm watching gay media just kind of shy away from whatever that once was. And then those places to one by one just vanish overnight. Till like they're almost all of them are gone. To me is like, I know it dates me as an older person to be putting out music talking about something that was also dying out. But I felt like this is meaningful. This is authentic. This is showing an homage to the not only the people that went there, but the people that ran them. And most of them had to probably lose their hat on it because, you just waited out, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, can't wait it out anymore. We have to close. And to see that happen to, places like that, also based on how people consume books just as much as they consume music, where bookstores were like, independent bookstores were like a dying thing in general, let alone these specialty gay bookstores.
So there's like that extra element, isn't there? That extra layer that lots of the owners would have felt that pressure because it wasn't just a business; it was a community hub.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about Lambda. because we're going all over the place. So can you describe the layout to me?
Layout, I remember it being kind of like almost like a record store, like long way like that, with different shelves and stuff. And it was not a very big place, but it was a very community place. And that's why it stuck out to me and why I mentioned it in the song, is because every time I would go to DC, I would stop in there, because it was like, it was a very concentrated version of what other bookstores were. It was a smaller space, but yet it seemed to have, I don't know, better selection of gay art and, musicians and DVDs, and like they seemed to have, whoever was doing all of their curating seemed to have a really good pulse on what was new. They also kept a lot of the magazines in there, of like the local magazines like Metro Weekly, which I was featured in a few different times. So you would, I'd go to DC before I'd play, no matter where it was, even if it was there. And I'd look at Metro Weekly to see how it was like listed as, my show that was playing. And if people were, it was like a very community check-in, like, oh, good, I'm here. Like, I'm going to go there first and say hi to everybody, And I don't think you got that in many cities, especially as you got more deep into the country, in the middle, like where I'm at right now. I don't think you necessarily got that potency of a community. It was very sparse, in some ways I loved playing small town gay places because people were so desperate for like something that when you came, it was an event. There weren't many of them, but they really treated you awesome because they were like, thank you for coming to, bumblefuck whatever, you know what I mean? And in the bigger cities, people saw a little bit more gay life, and they didn't feel like it was such a odd, small commodity that they had to grasp. But because there were so many of them, like in DC, you're like, oh, I'm going to play for an audience of people who are really going to get this because there's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
The same wavelength.
Yeah. So talk to me then about what a gig at Lambda Rising was like.
If I remember correctly, it was like in the back. I'm like dating myself because I feel like in my mind, I hate to say, because a lot of these places I can't just pull up and look at it inside. It's like a lot of them have blended in my brain to take on characteristics of each other. Like I have to think like, do you know what I mean? Like I'm thinking of Atlanta, and then I have to remind myself, oh no, that was the place in Milwaukee. Because if you think about it, it's like they were like almost like little Walmarts. Like they're all selling the same kind of stuff. So it's like I see rainbow flags, and I'm like, oh wait, which one was that? Which one was the one that had the flags on the side? And which one was the one that had the books over here and not over here? Because they all carried the same stuff. You know what I mean? So I remember it just being very long ways like that, and they had a really big window out front. Again, wasn't a very big place, but it was potent, like I said.
Mm-hmm. And so when you performed there, what was it like?
Just exciting to just be able to be amongst that community, just like a lot of them. It was just an opportunity to, to be a part of the culture and not necessarily be staring at it, feeling a disconnect. Mm-hmm. Like people cared about your opinions. People cared about what you were writing about. And when I would do a set list in a place like that, in a gay, bookstore, like I was so particular as to what I wanted my message to be. It wasn't necessarily about, oh, what song is the catchiest? It was like, what song is talking about what people are in here talking about? What songs can I play in here that other places I feel a sense of like, oh crap, this is really going to, I'm the one that has to walk out of this bar alone tonight. Is someone going to follow me? Mm-hmm. Is somebody going to beat me up? Like all my parents' worries about me going and playing gay clubs or gay spaces was like, oh, well, be careful because after you're done playing, somebody could bang you over the head while you're putting your guitar in your car. in the middle of the night. That's how things were back. They're still like that, as people are still getting beat up and taken out, after walking home or doing things. But I just remember that was your opportunity to play the songs and feature them in a way that you didn't get to feature them in other spaces because people might perceive them differently.
Yeah.
I would be playing like a bar or a pub or something, and people, like, I'd have a table of people who are like all into it, and you could tell they're a straight, group, so then it was always weird to be like, oh, I'm winning them over. How the hell am I going to like ostracize myself right now by playing something I know I don't have to play?
Yeah.
And I would test that all the time, but those gay bookstores were like, this is my chance to feature something and a part of me that doesn't get to see the light of day as much. Lambda and Outwrite and all these other different bookstores.
Yeah, and the chance to talk about the background to the song without then having to censor yourself as well.
Oh yeah, that like this is about my husband, or this is and before even he was my husband, like, we got married. Yesterday was our 8th-year wedding anniversary.
Wow.
I know. Can you believe that gay people were able to get? And that's illegal, by the way. 8 years was illegal in this country. We had to get married again 2 years after that for it to be legal. So we're legally married 6 years, illegally married 8 years.
Oh, so where did you get married?
We got married here in Tulsa at the Tulsa Garden Center. And I think we just hit a point where we're like, this is ridiculous. Like, we need to do something to show everybody that this is where we're at in this, and that, even though it's not legal, we're showing everybody around us that this is important to us.
Okay. Do you remember hearing about Lambda Rising closing?
Yes, I remember every time you would go to a different city, like you would hear about, oh, that's not doing so well, or, oh, it looks like that's not here. But I remember there were times where I think it was Lambda Rising, you'd go past there and it just vanished.
Mm-hmm.
That happened quite a bit where you'd be like, didn't this used to be, and then it's like, sorry, they went out of business.
Oh.
And it was, and then I remember Goldenrod saying like, and then they went out of business. Mm-hmm. Like the distributor wasn't making a lot of money in the stores, just as much as the store owners weren't making that much money on the product. So when the distributor kind of folded, like Goldenrod did, and sold everything, I mean, now that where were they going to get their stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So then, following suit, they kind of all started to fall apart.
The dominoes, yeah.
I'd love to see a flourishing of that vibe come back, especially to DC. I just remember that time period, and it kind of, that place sticks in my mind when I look back on LGBT rights and LGBT progressiveness, and that we felt like we were moving and we were fighting against something, but we were all doing it together. Mm-hmm. Like I really look back when I think about Lambda Rising, I think about that vibe, and the store wasn't just a place that had a bunch of things in it. It was these stores, especially Lambda Rising, like there was something living and breathing in there, and it was exciting to be in a place that was what now I think we kind of take for granted and live online with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not as rich of an experience. The way people go back and listen to vinyl music, which they don't have to do, and vinyl felt kind of dated. But if you listen to vinyl the way people who really love vinyl listen to vinyl, an MP3 sounds like crap. It misses, it dumbs it down, and you miss so much that you didn't realize was in there. The way that when you listen to vinyl, that you hear texture, you hear elements to it. Things move in a better way. There's like a sonic piece to it that wasn't there before in an MP3. And yes, MP3s are great because you can travel quickly with them, and they suffice in ways that don't have anything to do with music generally. Mm-hmm. But I feel the same way about these bookstores like Lambda Rising, the way I feel about vinyl. Like, yeah, it's a little harder to get. It's a bit outdated. There's quicker ways to do things. There's quicker way to buy things. But the feeling and the richness of that experience can only be felt by going back to things like that.
Did you ever go to Lambda Rising? Well, if you did, I would love to hear from you. Tell me your stories and share any photos or anecdotes that you might have from that time. You can reach me on all social media platforms with the user handle @KAndersonMusic. And you can also find out more about Eric at erichyman.com. And depending on when you listen to this, he may or may not still be using TikTok. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, Well-Groomed Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all streaming platforms. If you liked this episode, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told people who you think might be interested in hearing about it too. I am Kay Anderson, and you've been listening to Lost Spaces.